And I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Dawn Nielsen, who is our interim program director, for an opening remark.
Thank you, Dr. Graho. On behalf of the programs in occupational therapy, I would like to welcome all of you to the post-professional Doctor of Occupational Therapy capstone presentations. As many of you are aware, the doctoral capstone is the culmination of each student's doctoral journey, and it really is a testament to their ingenuity as well as their hard work and dedication. Jeanette, Julia, and Michaela completed a series of rigorous courses, and then under the guidance of a mentor, completed research projects designed to answer thoughtful questions that will change the way we think about or engage in specific clinical practice areas. So I'd just like to pause here for a moment to congratulate them on reaching this very important milestone. So if we can give them a round of applause. Congratulations to all of you. I'm looking forward to hearing your presentations, and I have no doubt that your work is going to impact future clinical practice. I'd now like to take a moment to thank Dr. Lennon Graho for his unwavering leadership under which the PP-OTD programs have thrived. And Dr. Graho will be saying a bit more about his leadership later in the presentations. And finally, I'd like to thank all of our teaching faculty and research mentors. We truly have an amazing group of educators and mentors that support our students along the way. And the programs in occupational therapy are grateful to each and every one of them. I'm now going to turn this back over to Dr. Graho, who's going to give us our house rules, and we'll begin the presentations.
Thank you, Dr. Nielsen. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today. This event is being recorded as all capstone presentations get posted on our OTD website. So please feel free to remove your videos if you don't want to be seen in the recording. I am Dr. Lennon Graho, Director of the Post-Professional Doctor of Occupational Therapy programs at Columbia University. This is my last capstone presentation that I'm organizing and facilitating. I would like to briefly use this opportunity to introduce everyone to the new incoming director for our Master of Science to OT Accelerated program, to OTD Accelerated program, and the Cognition-focused PP-OTD programs, who will be assuming the role effective June 1st. Please say hi briefly, Dr. Rochelle Mendonça.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lennon. It's exciting. It's big shoes to fill, but you know, the program will go on. Lennon has done a great job of transitioning over the program to me. You know, I'm going to see a lot more of all of you. Some of you maybe not after today. I look forward to this. I'm really excited.
Thank you, Rochelle. From the curriculum development days of this program and up to this moment, I have witnessed how a select number of applicants, seasoned and novice clinicians, have truly transformed, embraced the potential of the role of OT in cognition, and have expanded their knowledge and clinical applications to become agents of change in the profession. Many of our graduates continue to embrace change and have forged new paths and new roles in academia, leadership, and practice, all proud graduates of the Columbia PP-OTD program. It is a very distinct brand, a very distinct identity, one that I am really, truly proud of, and one I will always be proud of. So today we will be hearing about the capstone projects of 3 of our graduating students. This will be our process for today. Each candidate will present their digital portfolios and capstone projects for 20 minutes, followed by a 20-minute scholarly discussion. The scholarly discussion will have 2 parts. We will devote the first 10 minutes for the capstone committee comprised of the student's doctoral mentor and the capstone reader, and me as director of the program. After this process, we will begin what is called a moderated discussion. As a member of the audience, you can type in your comments and questions, and I will choose or thematize these questions for the doctoral candidate. We will have a short 5-minute break between the presentations. Please feel free to use your interactive buttons to send applause and congratulations, type comments and words of encouragement and greetings in the chat, but please keep your microphones on mute at all times except for the members of the capstone committee. We will begin with doctoral candidate Jeanette Ishmael. Her capstone is titled Utilizing a Cultural Humility Educational Module to Enhance the Knowledge, Beliefs, and Actions of Occupational Therapy Practitioners in Diverse Patient Settings. Jeanette's doctoral capstone mentor is Dr. Glenn Gillen, and her capstone reader is Dr. Rochelle Mendonça. Here to introduce Jeanette formally is Dr. Glenn Gillen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this day of scholarship and celebration. I am very, very thrilled to introduce you to Jeanette Ishmael. We've worked together for multiple semesters and have developed a really positive working relationship. And I'm actually very proud of the work that she has done. A little bit of background related to Jeanette. Jeanette Ishmael is an inpatient rehab occupational therapist. She's currently at Encompass Rehab in Florida. Don't be jealous. And she's been there for the past 3 years. She has developed and implemented an energy conservation program for patients recovering from COVID. And she's also a committee member of the Employment Engagement Organization, where she advocates for cultural humility amongst patients and staff members. She hopes to continue with research in cultural humility and patient care, as well as cognitive rehab and professional development for OT students and practitioners, and hopes to one day develop a podcast to facilitate conversations regarding new grads coming into the field of OT and breaking cultural barriers in the workforce in order to promote critical reflection and culturally sensitive care. I'd like to welcome
Oh, did we lose Dr. Gillen? I think he was going to say, let's welcome Jeanette Ishmael. Jeanette, you have the floor now.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Gillen, for your introduction. As OT practitioners, we are facilitators. We aim to be egoless, selfless, and empower our clients to achieve their goals and regain their independence. Coming into Columbia's post-professional doctoral program, I pondered the question, what does it mean to truly focus on others? This is not automatic. Naturally, as human beings, we are selfish. We think first me, then you, and focus on our personal needs before catering to others. Why? Because that is human nature. So how do we learn to truly focus on others and see others' perspectives in order to build trust? Through cultural humility. Cultural humility emphasizes a commitment to lifelong learning and an understanding of perspectives other than our own. It encourages a focus on intentionally looking from oneself to the patient and recognizing the power and privilege differences embedded within the patient and OT relationship. Though the literature discusses a movement toward cultural humility in OT, there is a need for instruments specific to OT that focus on cultural humility and encourage critical self-reflection throughout the OT process. Through participating in self-rating tools and educational modules focused on cultural humility, therapists can work toward providing culturally sensitive care. I will go into greater detail about the specifics of my capstone project later in the presentation, but I will first start by discussing my coursework and the completion of the artifacts that supported the development of my capstone project and contributed to my growth as an agent of change. My capstone objective focused on developing an educational module to enhance OT practitioners' knowledge, beliefs, and actions related to cultural humility. I will be discussing my doctoral journey and the 4 phases that contributed to the development of my capstone, including phase 1, program development artifacts, phase 2, educational artifacts, phase 3, evidence-based practice artifacts, and phase 4, the development of my capstone project and my evidence-based research paper. My journey started in the Advanced Application of Theories course that was facilitated by Dr. Graho. I started to develop my theory-guided practice model, the cultural humility model, that began to lay the foundation for the development of my capstone project, which I continued to build upon throughout my doctoral journey. The cultural humility model was guided by the ecology of human performance and the dynamic interactional model. Dunn's Ecology of Human Performance Model, or EHP, highlights 4 key constructs, including the person, context, task, and performance. This model looks at how the context, which could be physical, social, cultural, or temporal, influences our performance. Toglia's dynamic interactional model adds to the EHP model with a focus on the person-task-environment interaction to enhance performance and participation. The DIM model discusses the dynamic interaction between the person, task, and environment to see if the patient's performance can be facilitated by changing the task or activity demands, restructuring the environment, or enhancing the patient's use of strategies and self-awareness. Both the EHP and DIM model helped guide the cultural humility model with a focus on context and the importance of acknowledging and incorporating culturally relevant activities, tasks, routines into the OT process. The theory-guided practice model is addressed through the following essential elements shown here. The goal of the essential elements model is to enhance the cultural humility of OT practitioners. The 4 key components of the essential elements involved are: therapy sessions should consider the cultural relevance of patient occupations, meaning, are we as OTs considering the patient's culture and how they perform activities of daily living, such as dressing or bathing tasks when assessing them? Assessments and evaluations should factor in the natural environment. How can we best simulate the patient's home environment to facilitate carryover? Patients and therapists should have an ongoing collaboration. It is important to foster a strong therapeutic alliance with our patients and continually work with families to support our patients' recovery. And lastly, interventions should factor in culture as a part of the patient's activities of daily living. OTs should consider a typical day for the patient and what routines are important to them before intervening based on what they think is best for the patient. Moving through the doctoral process to my continuing education artifacts. This is just a brief overview of the educational artifacts, including my teaching philosophy, an in-service, and oral presentation. In the Methods of Teaching course, which was facilitated by Dr. Graho, I was able to develop a teaching philosophy that was best supported by a combination of andragogy, transformative learning theory, and self-determination theory. Andragogy focuses on encouraging self-directed learning and facilitating adult learners to identify their needs in learning through active experiences. I'm also passionate about transformative learning because it encourages learning in a safe, empowering space for adult learners to critically reflect on various experiences. This is shown in my capstone project, where I welcomed guest speakers to share their experiences with incorporating cultural humility into practice, encouraging participants to hear perspectives other than my own regarding cultural humility. Utilizing the self-determination theory, I aim to motivate students to connect with the information they're learning and apply their learning to practice. The ultimate goal of my teaching philosophy is to create an inclusive learning environment where students speak their minds, develop ideas, and advocate for society that encourages occupational justice for all. The next artifact that contributes to my continuing education artifacts is the guest lecture. I was given the opportunity by my colleague and friend, Michaela Frazier, to present at Long Island University to first-year master's level OT students. The 60-minute lecture was conducted via Zoom to 50 students and consisted of videos and case-based applications in order to apply their learning. The goal of the lecture was to improve students' understanding of the importance of cultural humility and cultural awareness, and to learn how to integrate these strategies in the classroom and OT practice. Moving on to my evidence-based practice project artifacts. This is just a brief summary of the artifacts that I completed. During the course Advanced Evidence-Based Practice, facilitated by Dr. Nielsen, I completed a scoping review to identify the gaps in the literature that helped in the development of my capstone tool and my capstone project and tool. The study was synthesized in a mini critically appraised topic. The aim of the study was to synthesize the evidence related to the features and characteristics of educational models that exist to improve cultural competence and identify the gaps related to cultural awareness training in occupational therapy. As shown on the Prisma flow diagram, I conducted a scoping review of the literature using several databases, including PubMed, Scopus, and CINAHL. Over 1,400 studies were identified and 17 studies were included and underwent a full review. This literature review allowed me to identify gaps related to features of educational models to improve cultural competence in OTs. The main themes that resulted was that there were two types of cultural competency strategies: didactic or instructional lecture style strategies, and experiential or collaborative group work strategies to improve culturally sensitive care. After identifying the gaps in the literature, I then worked to develop my tool, which contributed to a portion of my capstone project. In the course Measurement and Instrument Development, facilitated by Dr. Grajo, and with the guidance of my mentor, Dr. Gillen, I developed and designed a tool that contributed to a portion of my capstone, the Cultural Humility Self-Reflection Tool, which I'll refer to as the OT chart from now on. The OT chart is a 14-item self-rating tool, which consists of self-reflective questions regarding the OT process to improve OT's critical reflection on biases when working with a diverse patient population. The OT chart is intended for use by OT practitioners from novice to expert in all patient settings. Though there are tools currently utilized in practice that encourage healthcare practitioners to be culturally sensitive and reflective throughout practice, they are limited in that they do not focus on cultural humility and are not specific to OT practice, but are more broadly focused on healthcare practitioners in general. The aim of the OT chart is to fill the gap with an OT-specific cultural humility tool that encourages critical self-reflection and promotes culturally sensitive care. The OT chart measures the latent variable, cultural humility, through the sub-latent variables, knowledge, beliefs, and actions. These three sub-latent variables, or domains, are measured by having the OTs rate their level of agreement with each of the statements using a 5-point Likert scale. The knowledge and belief questions are scored in level of agreement with the statement. The action questions are scored in level of frequency, or how often the OT performs a particular action based on the statement. An example of a knowledge statement on the OT chart shown here is: I continuously reflect on my understanding of verbal and nonverbal methods used to communicate with clients from racially and ethnically diverse backgrounds to promote cultural humility. The OT would then rate their level of agreement to that statement using a 5-point Likert scale. The OT chart is scored by summing the Likert score ratings for each of the three domains: knowledge, beliefs, and actions. A composite score is received for each of the domains. OT practitioners are able to identify whether or not they are developing, emerging, or demonstrating high levels of knowledge, beliefs, and actions related to cultural humility. I did a preliminary capstone study, which is the content validation of the OT chart that is currently in review in the Occupational Therapy and Healthcare Journal. Content validity was measured through the recruitment of 6 expert OTs who reviewed and rated the relevance of each item on the OT chart to determine how well each test item represented the latent variable cultural humility. OT experts were recruited both in the United States and Australia based on the criteria that they were licensed, had doctoral degrees, interest or research in cultural humility. Prior to participating, OT experts agreed and consented to participate in the IRB-approved study. OT experts rated all items on the OT chart through a data analytics software called Qualtrics. Classical test theory was used to test for content validity. To obtain a content validity index for relevancy and clarity of each item, an ICVI or Item Content Validity Index was determined. OT experts rated each item from 1 to 4 to indicate whether or not they agreed the item was relevant, not relevant, quite relevant, or highly relevant to the latent variable being measured. The results of the study were that 10 items were considered excellent with an ICVI score between 0.83 to 1.0. 4 items needed revision, which are highlighted in yellow with an ICVI score of 0.67. And 1 item was eliminated, highlighted in red with an ICVI of 0.5. The questions and focus of the tool were revised based on expert feedback. With the original 15-item OT chart, the initial scale level content validity index, or SCVI, was 0.79. Because action item 1 received an ICVI score of 0.5, the research team decided to delete this item and recalculated the SCVI, which then made the tool 14 items. The new SCVI score of 0.84 is indicative of the relevance of all 14 items in the revised OT chart. I will now move on to my capstone project. After developing and validating my tool, I then worked to develop the Occupational Therapy Cultural Humility webinar that I administered across 4 weeks to 9 participants. Though 9 participants were consistent throughout the study, only 7 completed the pretest, the OT chart. Participants were recruited across the United States and were from a variety of practice settings, including home health, inpatient and outpatient rehab, and early intervention, to name a few. Participants were from various cultural backgrounds and all consented and agreed to the IRB-approved study. The participants took part in 4 modules across 4 weeks that lasted approximately 60 minutes each. Modules included case studies, readings, facilitated discussions, written work, and live speakers to facilitate learning. The modules focused on implicit bias, privilege and power as an OT practitioner, reflective practice, and understanding and applying cultural humility to practice. The OT chart, developed in earlier stages of my capstone, was used as a pre-post tool for the webinar to track change over time. The results of the study were analyzed through a Wilcoxon signed rank test. This test allowed me to compare the median scores for each test item across pre-test and post-test scores of the OT chart items. Though there were slight score changes in some of the items across all domains, the analysis indicated that there was no statistically significant changes between pre- and post-test scores. To hypothesize, this may be a result of the small sample population of 9 participants. A larger sample size may improve the score changes and strengthen the study in the future. Additionally, many of the participants joined having high levels of cultural humility, suggesting there was a ceiling effect based on the pre-screen. Thus, there was not great change over time. In order to improve this pilot study in the future, I would conduct the webinars over a longer period of time and recruit a larger and more diverse sample size. Participants were also encouraged to provide qualitative responses shown here and regarded ultimately that they felt the webinar improved their awareness and caused them to reflect on their goals, interventions, and assessment tools for their patients. The qualitative results of the study suggested that cultural humility webinars would be useful in practice. Circling back to the question I posed earlier, what does it mean to truly focus on others? After completion of my capstone project, I realized this means to critically reflect on our biases, commit to lifelong learning, and continue to collaborate with clients and their families throughout the OT process. As OTs, I hope that we can work toward achieving these goals in order to break cultural barriers. Throughout this doctoral experience, I've learned to be an agent of change through foundational theory-guided courses, discussions on occupational justice, and I've learned the importance of advocating for OT's role in cognition and practice. In the future, I hope to publish my capstone work on cultural humility webinars for OT practitioners and continue to advocate for my diverse patient population to ensure their voices are heard. Thank you. I would like to take a few seconds to acknowledge all the people that made attaining this OTD possible. Thank you so much to my Columbia OTD faculty. Thank you to my mentor, Dr. Glenn Gillen. Thank you especially to my reader, Dr. Mendoka. Thank you. Special thanks to my mentor and professor, Dr. Lennon Grajo. I could not have done this without any of you. A shout out to my OTD cohort and all those late night texts. Thank you to Dr. Hoyt, my Jefferson family. And of course, thank you so much to my family and friends. I love you, Mom and Dad. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. Jeanette, you can exit share screen at this point. Just a quick note, we will begin the scholarly discussion. I invite the audience to start typing in any comments, any questions for Jeanette as well. I will be moderating these questions, but we will begin the discussion now with Jeanette's capstone committee members, Dr. Glenn Gillen and Dr. Rochelle Mendonza.
Congratulations, Jeanette. It's so nice to see this come to fruition. I feel like I've been asking you questions for years now, so I don't have that many. But my interest was piqued related to the participants, actually. Did you find any of the participants feeling, what's the right word? I think a lot of people would like to think that they have cultural humility and they're culturally sensitive. Did you feel like they were not under attack, but they were, yeah. Was this a negative thing for any of them? I know the qualitative data was all positive.
Thank you so much for your question. I hope that they would not feel intimidated or just attacked in any way. I'd like to think that I welcomed everyone and it was a safe space. I made it known that it was a safe space for everyone to voice their opinions. This was something I was just facilitating, something I was excited about, and I wanted to share that passion with other people who were interested in the study. So it seemed like everyone was very excited to participate and, even provided feedback about how I can improve it in the future. So I'm just really excited that I was able to share it with them.
How is your retention during the modules? Did everybody participate? Did you take attendance?
Yes, I did take attendance. So I did have the 9 participants consistently stay throughout the whole thing. But then, certain people did not fill out the pre-screen. So some of that data was a little bit shifted, but in terms of
2 people, right?
Yes, yeah, the two persons. But in terms of participating, everyone, kind of participated in their own way. Some people mostly wrote, like they might type in their answer. Some people would write, something in email to me, or some people were more verbal. So you had different types of learners and people engaged in different ways with the work. So I was just excited to see people participate in any way, shape, or form. So I really wanted to make it an open forum for them to participate in any way that they felt that they could.
Great. One more, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Mendonça. I believe in your intro slides, you talk about patients and staff, both of them. What do you see going forward related to patients with this?
In regards to the tool or the cultural humility?
Maybe it's a whole different approach. I'm not sure. I was just wondering, I know you've been focusing on staff, but did anything cross your mind in terms of how to work with patients related to this?
Absolutely. And, I did get a lot of just feedback from a lot of the experts that did the content validation study. They were like, well, what about the patients? I know it's really important for the OTs to improve their cultural humility, but in terms of the patients, like, are they satisfied with the way, their OT practitioner is providing the care? Do they feel like it is culturally sensitive? So I feel like it would be interesting to look at the patient's perspective, and absolutely necessary, because, okay, we can feel that we are culturally sensitive or have cultural humility, but if the patients don't see it that way, that's what really matters. We want to be able to really engage with them and they want to feel connected to us in a sense of trust, or else we really wouldn't be able to effectively provide care to them.
Yeah, it's a really good point. All right, well, thank you so much. My questions are done.
Thank you.
Rochelle?
Yep. Jeanette, this was wonderful. I had a great time reading your capstone, reading your education. It was, it speaks to my heart, and I think you've done an amazing job. My one question, I think, that comes up for all of us in this kind of work is really when you get people to participate in any kind of programming, webinars, interventions around culture, competence, humility, it's always the people who recognize that there's a problem, right? How do we reach people who don't recognize that that's a problem, but it is a problem?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So I feel like I did come into that a little bit just throughout this journey. And I think this is going to be something that's ongoing, because you'll always have, people that either feel that they're fully competent, they know everything there is to know, or, there's nothing else to do here. There's nowhere else to go. But I think just providing that information, again, as I said, in a very open format for them, present it to them, and, say, these are the things, this can do A, B, and C for you. This is how it would benefit you in practice. These are what we're seeing in the literature in regards to patient satisfaction, patient outcomes, if they're more numbers oriented, and just see how we can, try to get through to them. And if it's, in terms of like quantitative information or more qualitative information, I think presenting them all the facts and presenting them with the information that the literature is showing in regards to all these cultural humility webinars or discussions that we're having now more often than not.
Right. That's great. My next question is more pragmatic, right? This is, when I was reading your tool, it was great. And, the questions were really well formatted. They forced you to think. They weren't just a yes, no. So you actually had to stop and reflect on yourself before you could answer, even for people who might have reflected in the past. How do you get this out to OTs? How do you get people to actually use this?
Thank you so much for that question. I also see that in the chat, like disseminating the tool. So I'm working currently on a website. So I have my tool currently on a website right now. I'm hoping that, I can get it published and sent out to OTs all over the world. That would be the hope. So that could be open sort of to everyone. I would also like to have the webinar, the OT cultural humility webinar, like possibly on MedBridge, so that practitioners can use this like towards CEUs. Like that could hopefully be like incentive to participate in this webinar. So those are the two avenues, I think, publishing the tool, maybe also like, I know they have, I think OT education summit. They have different summits that they have. I can connect with AOTA persons in leadership or people who are also in similar fields to connect with them to see how I can work towards disseminating this information to the public.
Right, right. And that's great, because I think also across the country in educational programs, we are looking for tools, right? To introduce this early, not wait till they're out in practice, because the sooner we can introduce it, start making people sensitive, not people, our students mainly, it's always better to start early. My last question for you, and this again came up for me as I was reading through your questionnaire, is why only OT? Your questionnaire could be applicable to any healthcare provider. It could also be applicable to people who work with patients, might not be healthcare providers. It's just, why are you limiting it to just OT?
That is such a great question. And this is something I've pondered and played with actually throughout my journey throughout this doctoral process. And I did start with it being open to not just OTs, but I noticed when I was doing a lot of the literature review, as I spoke on before with that Prisma flow diagram, that just all those studies, searching through those 1,400 studies, a lot of the literature was like in nursing, or a lot in nursing really. And then there was some in within physicians, pharmacy, had everything specific to like cultural humility or culturally sensitive care. And, you know, looking in occupational therapy, when I did like just a smaller search, I did not see too much like tools specific to OT practitioners. So I felt that there was a gap there. But this is absolutely, I would like this, you know, potentially, maybe I can make a different version of the tool that is open to other professionals. I don't want it to be limiting, but the only reason I did hone in on occupational therapists in general is because I didn't see, when I was doing that literature review, I didn't see a lot in OT. So I felt that there was a gap there.
Right. There definitely is a gap, but I would encourage you to think about taking it bigger, because I think you have something really great here. And, you know, I don't want it to stay just in OT, because I think all healthcare professionals can benefit from something like this. So that I'm going to leave you with that, but I have a lot of kudos for you in your rubric, but excellent job. And I loved, loved this whole presentation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gillen and Dr. Mendonça. Just in defense of Jeanette, it might have been my fault. She did start it as a tool for a broader population, but everyone knows the mantra, slice your pie small, and that's probably one of the reasons why. But she did start it from that broader perspective. Jeanette, I just have one question for you, and then I'm going to open it up. And I've seen a lot of great comments from and questions from the members of the audience. In the classroom setting, we have what we call classroom ruptures, when because of a sensitive topic, or when you talk about culture and privilege and race and implicit biases, there will always be some sort of defensiveness, or there might always be a reaction or a response that might impact or sensitively impact other students. I wonder in your sessions, and I know you start and you mentioned this, that a lot of your participants started at pre-test with a good range of sort of knowledge, beliefs, and actions in cultural humility. But I wondered if you experienced any of those ruptures or any uncomfortable moments or conversations. What was the topic? What was the source of that sort of discomfort or challenge in conversation? It sort of got not necessarily heated, but charged, or maybe just challenging to navigate. Were there any?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. I did notice that. I think just there were several points actually, but towards the beginning, I tried to make, again, like the blanket statement that I don't know everything there is to know about cultural humility. This is an open forum. I want everyone to feel that this is a safe space. But of course, you know, I did have moments, especially talking about power and privilege as an OT practitioner, and just, you know, in different settings, like we might wear a white coat. We're always the one with, you know, the pad and the pencil. So just automatically putting the patient in that feeling that, you know, I'm already inferior to this authority person. You know, a lot of, you know, people some felt that that was not true. They felt that, we're kind of on equal playing fields. Some people, just didn't necessarily agree with that. So it was interesting. I thought that that really allowed us to just have good discussions on just like what power and privilege means, like, and how it's just embedded in our relationships in general. We're providing care, but we also want to make the patients feel that their voices are heard, so that they come back to us, that they develop rapport with us and build trust, instead of just they feel kind of like, okay, they're in this position of power, they're giving me these goals, they're telling me what to do, what I have is not meaningful. So it was a back and forth discussion about, like, what is our privilege? Are we privileged? Where is this power coming from, and how can we kind of like equalize the playing field and really make patients feel welcome and want to collaborate and work with us and want to return?
Mhm. Excellent. I want to open it now. You have your biggest cheerleaders and supporters here asking you questions. I want to start with Dr. Catherine Hoyt, who is in the research faculty at Washington University in St. Louis. Hi, Catherine. We just saw each other this morning. You answered one of her questions already, but I want to expand on one of her questions. How do you envision the OT chart, the tool you developed, being used in clinical practice? When do they use it? Who uses it at what time in their careers? How do you envision it once it's publicly available? How do they use it in clinical practice?
I was thinking more along the lines of like professional development. So I know that at my job, we do these annuals. So like where you're, constantly asked, like, how do you feel that you're developing, or how can you better yourself, in the next quarter? So I was thinking that this could be like something that they might do initially, and then maybe like like halfway through the quarter, just to kind of measure and see how they're progressing in terms of their cultural humility. I would like this to be online, just to make it easier for people to access. I'm hoping to maybe, I need to collaborate with Van, because he's like all in like technology, like hopefully get this to an app format, so I can really, I know that's like the way of the future, using apps. So maybe create some sort of app so it's easily accessible in terms of scoring and everything like that. So that they can get their score, get the interpretation, and then they can kind of understand like where to go from there. On my tool, I do have like a toolkit at the bottom, where if you're like developing, emerging, or you find that you need to continue improving in your cultural humility, I have different like articles that you can read, or things that you can reference in order to improve your cultural humility related to knowledge, beliefs, and action. So that's something that I hope on the app or on the website, they would get that interpretation and understand where they can go, what resources they can use in order to like sort of continue to work to develop.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a library of resources in your OT chart manual. I want to read a comment now from Dr. Tina DeAngelis, one of your mentors from Jefferson. Hi, Tina. Good to see you. So she said, not a question, just a comment. It would be wonderful if this could also get into academia to encourage use with faculty and students, as we are white, cisgender, woman-dominated profession. It would be great if you submitted this to the Education Summit. I think this is related as well to Namrata's comment. Do you see this being used not only for faculty, but for students and undergrads as well?
Absolutely. And I think this is really important, a really important question, because when I did the cultural sensitivity segment at Michaela at LIU, it was really interesting just to hear different perspectives, and like people, one, never hearing this phrase before, this term before, and just kind of like talking about it, that just having that first conversation with a lot of the students really opened their eyes to, oh, okay, like this is something that's out there. This is what the literature is moving towards, instead of cultural competence. So definitely having those conversations earlier rather than later, I advocate for 100%. I think that's an absolute great idea. So that's something I would hope that even, within the curriculums, like maybe embedding some cultural humility terminology into the curriculum that we're using in our OT educational programs. Even some of the questions, when we have our end of the year questions for our exams, incorporating, or even the case-based applications. I know in Jefferson, like I know they were starting like a program in terms of like culturally sensitive, like changing up the language of some of those test questions or case-based studies. So just that, incorporating more of that would be an excellent idea.
Absolutely. And let's get this submitted for the Ed Summit coming up soon once the call for proposals, I think the call for proposals are open. Let's write it up. I also want to read a comment from Dr. Lydia Navarro Walker, also from Jefferson. Hi, Lydia. So good to see you again. She said, phenomenal presentation. The work you have done is so important and essential to the work we do as occupational therapy practitioners, educators, researchers, and more. Highly impressed and excited about the tool you developed. So I think you partly answered this already. Do you envision it can also be used as a tool at the academic level?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I think just thinking about this, absolutely, just not only for the students, the practitioners, but just anyone that is just wanting to learn more about cultural humility, or even high school students coming in like to the field of OT, that could be something interesting to have those discussions about, you know, the world, you know, we're living in a diverse world, and you have to be sensitive to your patient's needs. And in order to do that, we have to have these discussions regarding culturally sensitive care.
Absolutely. Just a final comment. Michaela said, our students benefited so much from your talk. Thank you for joining us and getting that conversation started. Jeanette is available for guest lectureships, keynotes, and other invitations. So if you have spaces in your academic programs, Jeanette is there. I'm her manager. I'm just kidding. She's available. She's a wonderful presenter, so she's available. Jeanette, lots of welcome remarks and congratulations on the chat. So please take some time to read over that. But I want to formally congratulate you and now mint you as Dr. Jeanette Ishmael. Great presentation. And again, thank you to Dr. Gillen and Dr. Mendonça for serving as her capstone mentor and capstone reader. Congratulations, Jeanette. All right, we're gonna, oh, Jeanette, go ahead. You have some time.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right. So please feel free to continue typing in your messages, and congratulations to Jeanette. We will have a 5-minute break before we proceed to our next presentation. Your Jefferson family is so proud of you, Jeanette.
Are you ready for me to screen share?
Not yet, hold on.
Okay.
All right, everyone, we'll get started. Our next presenter is doctoral candidate Juliana Perez. Juliana's capstone is titled Creating and Validating an Instrument Measuring Areas Impacting Student Success in Post-Secondary Education. Juliana's capstone mentor is yours truly, and her capstone reader is Dr. Razan Hamed. Let me introduce you to Juliana. Juliana has been an occupational therapist for the past 3 years. She started Columbia's doctorate program and residency working with students in higher education with Caltech in Pasadena, California, after graduating with her master's in occupational therapy from the University of Southern California. Her doctoral research focused on creating and validating an assessment tool, the Self-Assessment for Student Success, called SAS, to help students in higher education identify needs, self-select resources, and create goals based on their unique profile and their own definition of student success. As part of her capstone, Juliana received training on the RASH measurement, an experience she will also talk about in her presentation. Juliana hopes to help expand occupational therapy services in the emerging area of working with student populations in higher education. Juliana, you now have the virtual space and you can now share your screen.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Let me hide this floating bar. Thank you so much, Lennon, for that marvelous introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Juliana, and as Lennon said, my capstone is on creating the self-assessment for student success, or the SAS. My journey really began as a student before becoming an occupational therapist. I always struggled, though I got really good grades, I always had difficulties. And I wanted to know what we could do to help students. My time at USC, I wasn't able to receive accommodations like time and a half or a note taker because I didn't have the requisite accommodations. Likewise, I also didn't have the diagnosis necessary to see our occupational therapist working with students. And so I wanted to be able to create a tool that helps students to gain self-awareness and to measure areas of strengths as well as limitations so that they would really be able to guide themselves and identify where they can locate supports. So this entire process began at Columbia by conducting a scoping research review to identify the gaps in literature surrounding student success in higher education. While conducting that study, I found that the most salient definition of student success was that students reaping the promised benefits of post-secondary experience encompassing a combination of institutional and student actions to realize desired outcomes. Based on all of the literature review that I did, I developed a self-rating tool to help students measure perceived strengths and limitations to create self-selected goals towards success. And then lastly, I established the content validity and construct validity of the SAS to determine the psychometric properties. In addition to creating the SAS, I also collected a few artifacts on my journey. I created a theory-guided practice model called the PASS in Dr. Graho's Advanced Application of Theory to Practice course. The PASS, or Programs for Achieving Student Success, is comprised of 5 interlocking components, starting with the administration of the SAS, and as a pre and post assessment. So the results would be able to measure where students want to work on certain strengths. They would set long-term goals, short-term weekly goals, and also be able to self-generate strategies throughout the program, the intervention format following a 10-week long program to be available in a community setting, in a group setting, and also provide one-on-one. And students would, throughout the program, be demonstrating mastery and competence and self-generate skills, transference of their skills, and ultimately support student success. I also collected artifacts within the realm of education. As Lennon said, I completed a certification of RASH training, and I also had the opportunity to conduct a teaching assistantship. My certificate started really with the measurement and instrument development course led by Dr. Graho, and then the teaching assistantship was supported by Dr. Graho's method of teaching course, and of course, taking ethics and occupational justice with Dr. Janet Falk-Kessler. This is my certification of completion for the practical RASH measurement course that was taken through the Institute for Statistics Education, led by the renowned Dr. Everett Smith, who is the premier researcher on RASH and psychometrics. And this really helped me. I'm not a mathematician by any means. I always say that I was an English major, you do the math, but this really gave me an appreciation for using math and converting ordinal data into interval data and giving a value to what we call qualitative information. So opinions, and how can you make that measurable? And I think opinions should be one of the things that we consider most. I also had the pleasure of co-teaching ethics and occupational justice with the amazing Dr. Janet Falk-Kessler. Through this experience, I've been able to co-teach the MS to OTD students, and I was given the opportunity to lead the lecture on occupational justice and leading panoptos, which are pre-recorded lectures on where occupational justice meets occupational science, and also on how to develop rhetorical devices for communication and written skills. I'm very passionate about occupational justice, and teaching this course allowed me to really develop those skills that I learned in the teaching course, and philosophies such as perennialism, which looks at the classics and then building upon those classics as curricular content to build social reconstructivism, which is looking at the ethics and how does one measure what is right and just, and then using those notions from other people to develop their own notion of what they feel is just, so that they could become advocates of change within society as occupational therapists. I've often told Dr. Grajo throughout the program that we're being pushed to do these things that are so extreme that it feels like you're being pushed out of a plane and you just hope that your parachute deploys. And he told me, you are being pushed to do these things, but you're not jumping alone. You have your mentor and you have your cohort. So this is an example of that. And I created these educational artifacts on evidence-based practice, of course, the creation of the assessment tool and the measurement course led by Dr. Grajo, the grant proposal for the PASS from Grantsmanship with Dr. Kalina, and then the mini CAT, or the mini critically appraised topic, that was led by Dr. Nielsen, and the advanced evidence-based practice course. So this is where it all started. This is the self-assessment for student success. I identified the latent variable student success by looking at a lot of peer-reviewed evidence-based literature, which synthesizing all of what the literature was showing across a span of different professions, from clinical psychology to developmental psychology, education psychology, occupational therapy. We wanted to use a strength-based approach to give students the tools they needed to identify how they can use their strengths to address areas of limitation. So those definitions created these different domains: resilience, stress management, social support, quality of life, and study skills. The observable variables, which you see below each of the respective domains, were informed also by evidence-based literature. I wanted all of the test items, which the observable variables represent, to be based on research and to have a purpose. And I'm going to show you now an example of the test items. So this is one of the domains, social supports. Each of the domains has a definition so that everyone understands what that domain is asking and what it's about. And then each of the test items has a definition and asks the students a question. So you'll see here an example. Cohort affiliation has two different definitions. So based on the literature, there were two different aspects it was shedding light on. And these would bring out different aspects of different students. So for example, do the students have a sense of value with their university and community? Do they feel that they have opportunities to be actively engaged? Whereas the other one is, do they feel comfortable communicating with their peers regarding personal matters or school-related matters? So a student who maybe has difficulty with number 13 might be a perfectionist, might be someone with social anxiety, whereas someone represented in number 12, maybe there's someone who is a first generation student, someone from the LGBTQ community. You just maybe don't feel that you are culturally situated with the university and you require supports. And then of course, those interpretations are different depending on if it is a strength of theirs. And then for my mini CAT, my mini critically appraised topic, I wanted to ask the question of students seeking supports or services in higher education based on the strength-based approaches for obtaining supports versus deficit-based approaches. Given that the SAS is a strength-based assessment, I wanted to see what else was out there. And I really wanted to juxtapose it to those deficit-based approaches. A lot of the assessments that are available for students are deficit-based. I wanted to see what barriers there were in processing the received supports. And I also wanted to see particularly the barriers of financial obligation or time allocation, two things that students don't really have much of, as we all have learned. So this is my Prisma flow diagram. I conducted a study using two educational databases, ERIC and EBSCO, of 180 articles. After screening and testing for eligibility, I ended up including 8 articles. And what was found was really interesting to me, that the largest barrier was that students aren't really incorporated into contributing to the definition of student success. And this is really important because what students identify as success looks at their ability to be resilient, to show self-efficacy and self-determination, whereas the individuals who are responsible for creating those definitions of student success, researchers, deans, professors, they're looking at attrition, they're looking at outcomes such as GPA and grades, but you can't support success as it is measured by those higher up in education until we support what students identify as success. And so this really showed the need for an assessment like the SAS in higher education. I created the grant proposal, and it was really exciting, actually. The grant proposal, I had the opportunity to create a budget and show what resources were needed for running the program of the PASS, and I will have the opportunity to pilot that program at Caltech over this summer, and I'm really excited to do that. I created a 200+ word reflection on the doctoral process. And primarily, I drew from Advanced Application of Theory to Practice course by Dr. Graho, Cognitive Basis of Decision Making from Dr. Mendoza, and Ethics and Occupational Justice led by Dr. Janet Falk-Kessler. So these 3 courses really stood out because the frameworks from those 3 courses chiefly inspired my practice, namely occupational adaptation model, dynamic systems theory, principles of occupational justice. All of these frameworks incorporate the individual, their environment, and participation within that environment. And so by taking these things into account, these 3 frameworks enabled me to become an agent of change by creating a holistic approach to promoting student success in higher education as a therapist, as an educator, and as a potential instrument developer. And then lastly, I created the publication ready manuscript in the Writing for Publication course led by Dr. Duretti. And it was co-written by Dr. Lennon Graho on on the content validity of the self-assessment of the SAS. And we submitted it to the British Journal of Occupational Therapy for their special annual issue on occupational therapists in higher education settings. And then lastly, I conducted the content validity and construct validity of the SAS. So the content validity looked at the feedback from 9 experts within the community, ranging from occupational therapists, professors, clinical directors of psychology, services, learning specialists, accommodation specialists. And based on their feedback, what you can see here, out of the 34 test items, 6 received a score of 0.88 and 2 received a score of 0.75. The highlighted in green is 0.75. Though in order to require revisions, you needed a score of 0.70. We didn't require revisions, but we still wanted to take the comments into consideration and apply them before retesting the assessment for the construct validity. And at the bottom, you'll see that it received an overall score for the construct validity of 0.96 out of 1.00, so it tested really well. The construct validity looked at sending a digital version of the SAS to, we sent it to many students, and over the country, 57 took it, meeting the minimum requirement of 50 participants for rash calibration. And after recording the demographics and running the different tests, we measured 6 different areas. The first is the principal component analysis, which looks at dimensionality. Namely, you're looking at unidimensionality. Do the test items measure the construct of the latent variable student success? And as you'll see here highlighted in blue, it is actually a multidimensional, we'll hypothesize that it's a multidimensional construct. I think particularly because student success is a multidimensional construct in and of itself. Goodness of fit is asking whether each of the test items measures the area of student success. And 33 of the 34 test items met the Lineker guideline of 0.6 to 1.4. The only one that was a little bit outside of it was the self-awareness measure, which I actually had questions about when I created it, because how do you measure self-awareness? Like, are you aware that you're not aware? But we ended up revising this test item since it did exceed, and that will be shown in the retest. Person reliability looks at whether the individual test items are able to separate individuals appropriately given student success. So separation, as you'll see here highlighted in blue, was 1.92, and the minimum required is 2.00. Student reliability showed 0.79, and the minimum required there is 0.80. However, when you look at the KR20 or the Cornbatch Alpha, the equivalent to classical test theory, the student raw score is 0.93 out of a minimum of 0.80. And this indicates that when we do administer the test, perhaps with a larger sample, because we had such a small sample, ideally we'd have a sample of 150 to 200, that it will show moderate to really strong person reliability. This is a vertical ruler. This is another way of being able to identify whether the items fit well within each other. So 2 to -2 is ideal, and as close to 0 as possible is ideal. So you'll see here that all of the test items actually are a good fit per the vertical ruler. And then the Rasch-Andrich threshold, this item looks to see if the 4 rating categories of significant strength, represented number 4, relative strength number 3, relative challenge number 2, and significant challenge number 1, if all of those different categories are able to measure those aspects within a student. And you'll see here, given that each one has its own unique curve, that it does. And then lastly, for the advanced analysis Jens Q3, which Dr. Graho helped me with as it is advanced, we looked at the correlation or the local independence of all of the test items. So a positive correlation, which you see here on the left, that indicates that these items are dependent on each other. So we went through all of the items to see why that might be. Some of them, there was a reason that there might be dependence. For example, if you are not exercising, you might have exacerbated stress, which then might impact your sleep. So items looking at exercise and sleep are going to impact each other. For the entire correlations, we ended up removing 3. And we combined 4 and revised those 2 that we combined. And then the test went from 34 test items to 29. So lastly, I would just like to take a moment to thank everyone. I want to thank Dr. Graho, whose work with students with reading difficulties really inspired me actually to become an occupational therapist. I wanted to help students like myself who needed help. And then after seeing his work, I realized that I could do that as an occupational therapist. And he actually recruited me to join this program while I was at USC in a USC classroom. So Dr. Graho, you've been more than a mentor, you've been an inspiration. And so thank you. I also want to thank all of the professors. You have been a great team. As Dr. Graho said, like, I never felt like I was jumping alone, though doing things that are very intimidating. My cohorts, as Johnette said, there's no way that we could have done this without one another. And I'm very grateful to my family, friends. I especially want to thank my Caltech family, especially Dr. Grace Ho. You have been so gracious. Your name is not a misnomer. You have been an amazing mentor and really have given me the opportunities to facilitate so much of what I've created at this program. So from research to practice, and I'm so excited to get to use the SAS and the PASS at Caltech over the summer. And lastly, to my mother, who deserves a doctorate all unto herself for all of the support and love that she has given me. She's an amazing, strong woman, and she has been an example to me my whole life. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Juliana, for a wonderful presentation. I saw Dr. Julia Guzman, who is one of my other Roche-trained doctoral mentees, pop in quickly earlier. I'm sure she's very proud of you of the work that you've done. We're going to begin our scholarly discussion, same format. Please start typing in any questions you have for Juliana. We will provide the first 10 minutes for the Capstone Committee. Actually, Dr. Razan Hamed, do you want to get started?
Yeah, great work, Juliana. I'm happy for you for doing this amazing and important job. And I really look forward for your publication. Hopefully that comes out soon and such a reputable journal. So good luck with that. My question is, like, first of all, like, let me give you like a few comments. I love how you connected the occupational justice and science to this topic, because I think that tends to be overlooked when it comes to, you know, this population particularly. So I love seeing that happen. Also, I think your project is very timely with your approach to strength-based. Everything is, you know, the trend now. So this is very timely. And it's also timely that, you know, with this pandemic that's been around for 2 years, I think the student population also have been overlooked for a while, and this pandemic, you know, pulled us back to pay attention more to this population that we take for granted for some reason. Students are strong and like motivated, and because of that, we take them for granted. So this is great, and this is very timely. I have like one big picture kind of question. How do you think student success is different across, you know, the past, let's say 10 years? Did you see in your work and your scoping review, did you find any trends, how people define success differently now?
Yes.
Julia, before you answer, I'll ask you to exit share screen first so we have the full gallery view.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Dr. Hamed, and thank you so much for serving as my reader as well. So this area, as I said, it's really grown, and looking at more what the students say they want to measure for success. A lot of the literature before was looking at accommodations, difficulty getting those accommodations, like in the early 90s especially. And that was even innovative unto itself. People thought, oh, well, this is enough, or, you know, they weren't really aware of learning difficulties. But what I found in the literature, and the reason we wanted to take a top-down approach and a strength-based approach, is that anybody, it doesn't matter if you have a learning difficulty, can experience difficulties with comprehension, with concentration. If you have exacerbated stress, as we've learned in our cognitive and neuroscience courses, you're not able to really access these executive functioning skills that are so requisite to student life, to being able to show time management, organization, and routines, and studying, and also just how much energy, metabolic energy, is required to study. So just understanding for students, building success really is holistic. So as you said, it is incredibly timely, because luckily now there is all of this evidence-based research from practice looking at how a student's life is impacted. And it's not just in the classroom, it is holistic. It is OT, which is so exciting. And I think that this is a great time for this emerging area to be getting in there, because there is evidence showing how our services are needed to be able to evaluate and look at if you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, not only like are you eating for energy, but there's so much food that helps for cognitive focus. And also just looking at like if you aren't able to manage your stress, or if you don't understand where to go for supports, or supporting yourself, or believing in yourself, then there's nothing that you can really give the individual in terms of accommodations. And there's a lot of literature too that shows that accommodations are insufficient. You know, if students don't know how to utilize them, or if they don't know how to fix the difficulty at home when they're studying. So I think that there's a lot of interesting literature showing how we need to support the student in being a really self-driven individual. And then especially in that phase of their life, when those processes are being integrated neurologically, I think it's a really important time to get in and help students to build those adaptive responses.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So my second and last question would be, if we are to marry Jeanette's, approach to cultural humility with the work that you're doing, and in terms of, I think cultural humility is everything. And I it's so interesting that these two are coming, the two projects are shown today. How, you may or may not have an answer to this, but how do you think adding the awareness, because you highlighted self-awareness, how do you think that the self-awareness of being a culturally aware student practitioner one day can add to that idea of success? I think, in my opinion, the more culturally aware we are, that also contribute to our success as practitioners, as learners. How do you see this fitting into your model or your tool one day?
I love that question. Thank you. Because as we said, this cohort it becomes our strength, but I also see how we are able to work together. So Jeanette's work and my work, and then Van, and it's all so relevant to supporting each other. But you have to have cultural humility and awareness, because as we know, universities are microcosms of society. We are representing people from every background, religious and sexual orientation, and now there's growing awareness of the transgender community. We need to be self-aware of how our background culturally informs our decision-making and our self-awareness, and how can we grow. So one of the things that we actually start off by teaching in ethics and occupational justice is giving people all of the self-quizzes to test their subconscious views on different people from different demographics. And it's really important, because you might have preconceived notions from your childhood that you're not aware is impacting you. So by looking at those preconceived notions and just wanting to learn and access the tools to learn, it's very in keeping with what we're asking the students to do with assess, right? We want you to gain self-awareness, use your strengths, but don't deny that you have areas too that require supports. And so looking at where you can get those resources for support and facilitating that, I think it's really crucial. And then also just giving, again, students a space, like I was saying, in looking at the cohort affiliation, giving students a space where they feel that they can come and identify who they are. It's a really exciting time that for the first time, maybe in the undergraduate or even maybe at the graduate level, you're really coming to terms with who you are as an individual, apart from your parents, apart from how you were raised. You're in a new environment with people from different backgrounds and different perspectives. So how can we allow them to look at that and embrace that in a way that is safe, and then allowing that to then inform their self-efficacy and their sense of resilience, not just as an individual, as a student.
I think that's a great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Razan. Fabulous questions. Juliana, I'm going to grill you on rationalysis. No, I'm just kidding. A couple of comments first before my actual questions. I have to say the work that you've committed in your assessment tool, it's one of the most comprehensive manual drafts that I've reviewed in the iteration of course that I've done. The way you really went into the literature, defining every single variable and letting the literature inform every single test item is on its own such commendable work. So I have to congratulate you on that. And the other thing I need to congratulate you is really, of course, on personally being really wanting. You started the conversation of, I want to do the basic RASH training. And this is my only RASH question. Tell us about that experience, because I went through that training, and that's not the easiest and simplest. When psychometricians teach, they teach on their own world. And so tell me about that experience. Namrata took that course as well. Julia took that course as well. Tell me about that experience, and how did that help you prepare for this capstone?
Well, at first it was terrifying. I always say, I'm an undergrad, I was an English major, you do the math, so I was scared. However, I knew that it was really the best fit for this assessment. Having taken your course, looking at classical test theory, rationalysis, I wanted to use rationalysis. I wanted to be able to take qualitative data, take student responses and their perceived strengths and limitations, and then really use that to show quantitative results, which is what a university looks for. It's all about the numbers. So I knew that it was something I had to do. So I just kind of ran headfirst into it. And I can't, I'm far from the expert, but I definitely have a growing knowledge of it. I feel much more comfortable with it. And I'm really glad that I did learn it. I have more insight to it. And I think it's going to help me as I continue to retest. And I have to say this, I got a little nervous and I forgot to mention at the end that the SAS is actually ready for use and dissemination. And that's so exciting. We just need to test it again as a multidimensional construct and using larger samples. So, but otherwise it is ready. And I'm going to be, like I said, administering that over the summer with Caltech. So I have a little bit of a captive audience. So they're in the first go round. We got 57 because 34 test items is a lot and there's no incentive. I couldn't take out another student loan to give everyone a $5 gift card to Starbucks if they participated. So I'm hoping that now that they'll actually have results and supports that's more incentive to take it, and that'll help us to get a larger sample.
One more question and then I'll get to the questions on the chat. And this is more personal, actually. Before I joined Columbia, I was working with colleagues from a previous institution who've started some of the clinical work on OT in higher education. And I believe you have correspondences with them as well. But it seemed to have slowly, very slowly, the work of OT in higher education have just slowly started to permeate. And now with this big focus on student wellness for expanded services for students with accommodation, I'm wondering why you think it's not happening more. And on a personal note, tell us about how you got into this job at Caltech and how you started your work in OT in higher education and how you want to expand this work so that more and more OTs can get involved, or more universities will start hiring occupational therapists as part of that suite of services provided in student health and wellness.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Lennon. So to speak to the first part, I think that it hasn't been because I hate to put it this way, but I think that, universities are also institutions. So where funding is concerned, a lot of it goes toward the academics. We want buildings, we want, the professors and researchers, but they weren't paying attention to the fact that these researchers are not doing well. I actually even led a seminar with postdocs and physicists from all over the world. It was via Zoom. It was held in Sweden, and people came in from everywhere, and people who have been physicists for a long time were experiencing the exact same difficulties the graduate students were. And so, like I said, I think a lot more evidence-based research is coming out now in neuroscience and in different fields to support why we need to help individuals and how that's going to then impact their work. And I think luckily with Google and with all these different companies shedding light on how giving people spaces that feel welcoming and really helps creativity and productivity. So it's like, it actually helps you to be supportive of the individual. And so in terms of my own interests, like I said, I just needed supports. I didn't know this was something that really existed. And I just knocked on every professor's door at USC until I found someone who was actually able to direct me to Dr. Grace Ho. And she had just got her position at Caltech, and I went and I spoke to her, and like I said, she was very gracious, bought me a coffee and showed me around Caltech, and we just built a really strong connection. And so after that, I had applied to multiple universities, and I actually got callbacks. Like I cold called administrators and directors of programs, and I actually had something set up, but when the opportunity came up to work with Grace, I wanted to take that because we're such a strong team, and I really love Caltech. And so, yeah, right now, I'm really hoping that as this is something that's growing, I'm able to get the SAS online. I'm also going to be using Van. We're digitizing it. We're going to create a website. So then as I would have loved to have included everything that impacts student life, but there's just no time to do that. We wanted to be comprehensive and concise. And so we're going to be able to really expand upon these unique things that could be impacting students when we create those student profiles. And then my idea is to be able to have not just resources, but I want to have video links explaining different things, and it could possibly even, become either a podcast or YouTube channel to support students in higher education on specific areas, and really just making it a strong conversation and getting that out there in that way. And then for getting it out there and everywhere, I've actually had interest already in the assessment tool, and that was before it was created. So that just shows the need for it. I am on social media sites with occupational therapists, so I'm going to post it there, and hopefully it's something that they can use. There's been interest in using the PASS program, and like I said, I'm piloting that at Caltech, and there's other universities that want to use that as well. So we'll see from there. Like Van actually encouraged me to go to these tech seminars, and they're talking about the technology. So much like I connect with you for RASH and implementing it in that sense, I'll be connecting with Van to be expanding the technology aspect of it. And I'm just hoping that it's something that is very comprehensive and then making it accessible to everyone.
All right, Juliana, I have a couple more questions. So briefer answers this time because I want to squeeze them in. Really great questions. One from Dr. Sarafian, who is our liaison to disability services. And she asked, did the students discuss the barriers and any inequities to the requirement for formalized testing to receive or be eligible for accommodations at most universities?
So I actually looked for those answers when I was doing my mini-CAT, and that didn't come up as much because that was a barrier for myself. I couldn't get the diagnosis because it took so much time and was too expensive. So that didn't come up as much in the literature. But again, it could be because the literature is being conducted by the researchers and not necessarily by the students. But I would agree that I think that is absolutely a strong barrier.
And then the other question is from Dr. Mendonça. She asked, how do you see the results being translated? And I think I know your answer to this already. To what resources can be built for faculty and students to help them succeed as a result of taking the SAS?
So I think I already touched on that a little bit, but it's really empowering the students, giving them the resources to gain self-awareness, giving them because they don't always have time, and there's a lot of barriers, including self-stigma, to getting supports, even if they know where to go, and they don't always have time. So I want to give them places, via videos and also things that are already available, resources online, so that they can learn. And so just this assessment is not meant to be diagnostic, but it is meant for them to shed light on their areas of need as well as strength. And so based on that, just knowing where they can go and what self-assessments are out there to gain a little bit of information, or as I like to say at Caltech, collect data on themselves.
Excellent. And if once it's out, Juliana, and once Van has helped you with the website, the actual draft manual right now with the tool, once you get your profile of scores, it has pages and pages of resources and links that students and faculty can use based on their student success profiles that the students will be able to link to and open up and read more for how they could advocate for their needs. So congratulations, Juliana. Excellent work. Congratulations, Dr. Juliana Perez. Lots of messages on the chat about how wonderfully you analyze your data on your item characteristic curves for your categories, how wonderfully you did your RASH analysis, and you seem like an expert doing it. And congratulations and thank you to your parents and your mentors and your colleagues as well who are here. We're going to open it up for 5 minutes of a break. If your family and friends are here, they can use that space for congratulations and messages as well. So if you want to unmute family, friends, Dr. Grace Ho, I think you were here earlier. Feel free to send a message or greeting to Juliana. I know Mom was here, correct?
Mom is here.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Go ahead, Mom.
Hello, Mickey.
Sorry. I have seen Juliana grow from the beginning.
Oh, my mom doesn't cry, Mom. It's okay. I'll hug you later.
It's just been an amazing process to see her go from the beginning of this program to the person that she is now. And I truly believe that she will make a lot of difference in a lot of lives.
Oh, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mom.
So proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Leave that to me, Nikki. Hello from Scotland.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for joining.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You're just such a star, Juliana. We're very proud of you.
Oh, thank you. So this is the amazing Elizabeth, or Liz Kane, and she actually teaches mindfulness and took classes with Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh. So she's an amazing lady.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Your brother and Abuela are here as well from the chat. Hi.
Abuela, hi. ¿Me puede ver?
Ay, mi amor, qué felicidades, mi cielo.
Yo también.
Ay, Juliana, felicidades.
Muchísimas gracias. Yo sé que no me podía entender, pero muchísimas gracias para estar aquí y para verme. Te quiero mucho y nos vemos mañana.
Ay,
Primero Dios, la queremos mucho. Besitos.
Gracias.
You did an amazing job, Julie.
Thank
Really
you.
proud of you.
Thank you, honey.
Van needs a business proposal. Van, you'll get a lot of business from the OTD students
My
developing assessments of this program.
I'm always here for anyone. So.
Well, Van knows. I already told
Congratulations.
him. Thank you. Yeah.
Congratulations, Juliana, from Montana.
Oh, thank you, Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa.
That was a fantastic presentation and you look beautiful and I'm very, very impressed.
All right, everyone, we are going to our next and last presenter, doctoral candidate Michaela Fraser. Michaela's capstone is titled The Development and Testing of the Personal Professional Development Tool for Occupational Therapy Students during Community-Based Service Learning. Michaela's capstone mentor is Dr. Pat Preeson, and her capstone reader is Dr. Phyllis Simon. I'll now turn this over to Dr. Preeson for her introduction.
Welcome, Michaela. Dr. Michaela Fraser's interest in community-based work developed as she pursued her Bachelor's of Arts from Hendrix College. She then earned a Master's of Science in Occupational Therapy and a Master's of Public Health from Columbia University in 2016. After graduating, she joined the staff at New York Presbyterian Hospital and gained clinical experiences across the spectrum of care, from the intensive care units to the inpatient rehabilitation unit. She particularly enjoyed mentoring students during their fieldwork placements and within a free primary care clinic. So, with an eye towards eventually transitioning into academia, she signed on as a clinical researcher in the Department of Rehabilitation and Regenerative Medicine at Columbia University. In this role, she collaborated with physiatrists, engineers, and occupational, physical, and speech therapists on a variety of clinical trials with particular emphasis on neurorehabilitation techniques. In 2020, she joined the faculty at Long Island University in Brooklyn, where she teaches core courses about adult physical disabilities and coordinates community-based learning opportunities for students. Thank you very much. Welcome, Michaela Fraser.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Preeson, for the introduction. And thank you for everyone for joining today. I'm excited to share my doctoral journey with you and continue this discussion that's on theme with my two colleagues from Just service learning. So I wanted to provide a definition set. Community-based service learning is a type of experiential education in which students with background about how I became interested in this topic. As a kid from Long Island, it surprised many people that I chose to go to a small arts like Arkansas. And though I didn't quite have the vocabulary at the time, I knew Hendrix College was the right fit for me precisely because they had such great emphasis on experiential learning. And that's really where I fell in love with service learning. Thankfully, during my OT master's program, I continued to expand my horizons through service learning. So fast forward a few years into my OT career, and I found that I felt particularly fulfilled when mentoring OT students during field work and instructor. And I remember, given Columbia Learning as a means to enhance entry-level OT education. Initially, I planned to develop and implement practice guidelines for service learning and OT education. But as you can imagine, the onset of the pandemic during my second semester had a major impact on higher ed and service learning. So I ultimately shifted my capstone to focus on the development and initial testing of an outcome measure for service learning. Doctoral journey has been a rewarding exercise in flexibility and persistence. And as an educator, these are traits I hope to model and help my students cultivate, as they're so essential for OTs. So as I walk you through my experience, I'll refer back to this graphic several times. During the first phase of my doctorate, I focused on a program development project where I drafted a theory-guided practice model for community-based service learning during OT education. Noted the clear parallels between education and OT.
Michaela, your internet is going in and out.
Sorry?
Michaela, your internet is going in and out. So I'll ask you to turn off your video just so to improve your bandwidth just a little bit, and we can still hear you.
Okay. Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
All right. Expected a curveball here. Just teaching on Zoom yesterday. Is that any better?
Yes, there's still a little bit of catch, but I think a lot better.
Okay, maybe I'll ask my husband maybe to sign off and just call in on your phone. Okay. Okay. So sorry about that.
Did we lose you?
So I just can you hear me?
No, we've completely lost you at all. Maybe either you use a hotspot or get wired in.
Oh yeah.
It's okay.
That's just frustrating.
Don't stress. Yeah, I think we can hear you now clearly.
Okay.
So go back to share screen if you can.
Okay. Is that a little bit better?
It's still loading up. Yep. All right, let's try again.
Okay. So I was discussing the theoretical base for my work, and altogether these models support the use of service learning as a powerful mechanism to promote students' quest for mastery by supporting active, self-directed learning in highly contextualized learning spaces, centering social and emotional aspects of learning, and facilitating self-reflection. This theoretical base informed the 6 essential elements of my practice model. Together, these elements indicate that the learning process is active, reflective, and individualized, and that it can be enriched by facilitative educators in collaborative learning spaces. Additionally, educators must establish sustainable partnerships in the community and help students prepare for the unique cultural and contextual factors relevant for their service learning program. The second phase of my OTD was very meaningful for me as I got to explore my passion for teaching. When I pursued the opportunity to adjunct teach a course at LIU Brooklyn in the spring of 2020, I never could have anticipated that a global pandemic would necessitate a full shift to virtual learning midway through the semester. Needless to say, it was quite overwhelming as a novice educator, but I benefited from great mentorship both at Columbia and LIU. The whole experience required flexibility, perseverance, and creativity, much like right now, which again emphasized the many parallels between the traits needed for clinical OT practice and for teaching. The deep sense of fulfillment I experienced, even under these difficult circumstances, really affirmed that teaching is a vocational calling for me. So I was able to process my whirlwind adjunct teaching experience during the methods of teaching course, where I also developed foundational skills necessary for a career in academia. I built upon my understanding of andragogy and experiential learning theories to draft my initial teaching philosophy. In particular, I strive to model an enthusiasm for collaborative discovery, craft active learning-centered experiences, and instill the importance of self-reflection. I share strategic details of my personal and professional journey and ask students to do the same in an effort to humanize clinical content, encourage deep learning, and build a trusting rapport. I'm pleased to share that by the end of my first year in the OTD program, I was appointed as an assistant professor at LIU, and I felt more prepared for this transition following the second phase of my doctoral journey. During the third phase, I developed several partnerships for service learning projects, which were ultimately postponed or canceled due to the pandemic. Though I hope to revisit some of these opportunities in the future, this is when I shifted my capstone focus. As I explored the evidence base, it became clear that there is a need for an outcome measure that specifically assesses individualized learning outcomes for OT students from service learning. In order to take a more structured look into the related literature, I conducted a scoping review. My focus research question was, what are the characteristics and features of community-based service learning that have been used in OT education in the US in the last 20 years? As you can see from the Prisma flow diagram, it had quite a high yield of results, which indicated that service learning had indeed become widely adopted. Ultimately, I reviewed a subset of included studies to complete a mini critically appraised topic. A few themes emerged. Self-reflection and debriefing are common threads, but educators use a wide variety of approaches for integrating service learning into the OT curriculum. Student outcomes from service learning may be inconsistently or inadequately measured, and there is a great diversity of study design and outcome measures used. As there is no broad consensus about best practices for measuring student outcomes, the quality of scholarship in this area would be enhanced through the development of a widely available, semi-structured outcome measure that targets important areas of student development. So with this need clearly identified, I developed a personal professional development tool, which I will call the PPDT. This tool is grounded in the theoretical base I described earlier, where students are active co-creators of their learning experience. The purpose of the PPDT is to facilitate self-reflection to help OT students gain insight into their performance as practitioners in training. It aims to guide their ongoing development in professional roles throughout a service learning experience across these 5 essential domains: clinical competency and professional reasoning, interpersonal skills, professional behaviors, cultural critical consciousness, and reflective thinking. The PPDT is an ipsative or a self-referential assessment for students. So students self-select 8 to 12 items across these 5 domains to set as their learning goals. The items for each domain are outlined here in the dark blue boxes. This approach allows for critical flexibility and use of the PPDT to accommodate the wide variety of service learning contexts and student needs. The OT educator guides the students through the administration process before and after a service learning experience. Students self-rate their perceived relative mastery for each selected item. Relative mastery is measured across these 3 dimensions: effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. Each is rated on a 1 to 10 scale at both pre and post test. I've included some samples to illustrate the administration process. This is a sample of a completed rating grid for the clinical competency and professional reasoning domain. Here, the students self-selected 2 items in this domain that were meaningful for their development and related to their upcoming service learning experience. They then rated themselves for both items at pre-test and calculated their domain relative mastery score according to the instructions, which in this case totals 40. An important step at pre-test is for students to articulate their individualized learning goal related to each selected item, as seen here in the rightmost column. For example, for the first item here, the student specifically wants to improve their ability to identify and administer appropriate performance-based measures. The student would then repeat this process for the remaining 4 domains. After the service learning experience concludes, students re-rate the same items. This sample shows how the students reviewed their change in scores from pre to post tests for each domain. A critical step of the post test is for students to reflect on their experience and interpret their score changes. Since this is a self-referential tool without benchmark scores, their interpretation actually provides the meaning behind the number. Sticking with our sample, the student provided valuable interpretation. For example, in the top box on the rightmost column, they note that they have improved their ability to administer assessments with clients, yet they feel they are slow and they want to continue improving efficiency in administering, scoring, and documenting assessments. So as you can see, results from the PPDT help students gain insight into their development. Additionally, results provide educators with information that they can use to enhance the educational experience. The 4th phase centered on my capstone research projects, where I content validated the PPDT and then pilot tested it with OT students. To begin the preliminary testing of the PPDT, I conducted a content validation study using Qualtrics. To establish content validity, 6 experts rated the relevance of each of the 29 test items for measuring the central construct of OT student personal professional development. They rated each item on a 4-point scale from 1, not relevant, to 4, highly relevant. I then calculated the item level content validity index, or the ICVI, for each item and adjusted for change agreements. 27 items had excellent ICVI of equal to or greater than 0.8, and they were retained as written. 2 items, highlighted here in yellow, had fair ICVI of 0.67, so I reviewed them. Because the experts were able to provide feedback on each item, their comments led to minor revisions in wording for clarity on these 2 items. The PPDT also has acceptable scale level content validity of 0.91. Overall, results from this study suggest that items on the tool do adequately capture the important domains of OT student personal professional development. Thus, the tool is likely to be useful for guiding student development during a service learning experience, and pilot testing of the revised tool in the field is warranted. I had the opportunity to present the development of the PPDT and the results of the content validation study in a poster session at the Janet Falk-Kessler Distinguished Lectureship back in December. I've also been accepted for a short oral presentation at the upcoming WFOT Congress. This work also served as the basis for my publication-ready manuscript, which I drafted during the Writing for Publication course. The manuscript is currently under review with the Journal of Occupational Therapy Education. I selected this as my target journal because they publish high-quality original research that advances innovation in the scholarship of teaching and learning in OT education. Furthermore, as an open access journal, I hope that our work will have greater reach. Before I could conduct my first pilot study in the field, I needed to develop a new community partnership. And over the course of the year, I worked collaboratively with my LIU colleagues and leadership from Independence Care System, or ICS, to forge a sustainable community academic partnership. In light of the ongoing pandemic and uncertainty about when in-person placements would resume, we developed an innovative virtual community-based service learning experience. And I worked to ensure that the experience would offer students the same opportunities for highly contextualized, effective, and relational learning as an in-person experience. Among other responsibilities, the students developed content and led 2 6-week virtual wellness groups for ICS members with physical disabilities. Group 1 focused on interventions to take charge of your body, and Group 2 focused on rest and resilience. The partnership with ICS has been fruitful and will continue to evolve in future semesters. This program served as the setting for my second research study titled Student Satisfaction with the PPDT During a Virtual Community-Based Service Learning Placement, a Pilot Study. As the OT educator for the Service Learning Project, I facilitated pre- and post-test administration of the PPDT with the 4 student participants. After post-test, students anonymously completed this satisfaction survey about their experience using the PPDT. Students responded to 13 questions on a 5-point Likert scale from 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree, and provided some open-ended feedback. I ran basic descriptive statistics on results from the PPDT and the satisfaction survey, and I reviewed student reflections to help interpret the data. Results from the PPDT demonstrate that students perceived meaningful growth across all domains. Though score changes were comparatively small in the cultural critical consciousness domain, students' interpretations of these scores still reflected development, such as feeling more knowledgeable about the impact of socioeconomic status on healthcare and well-being. Their interpretations were instructive for me as the educator. For example, one student noted that though implicit and explicit biases do exist, they did not believe bias got in the way of providing care. This highlights an area for me to continue to target in the classroom and in future iterations of the service learning program. As you can see in this graph, results from the student satisfaction survey are favorable, with an overall median response of 4 out of 5, indicating agreement with the survey items. Students indicated that the PPDT helped them focus on setting their own learning goals and reflect on their own growth. They stated that OT students would benefit from using the tool during future community-based placements. Their responses also indicated the need for revisions to the tool that would streamline administration and scoring, such as implementing a web-based platform. Given the small sample size, results should be interpreted cautiously. However, this pilot study suggests that the tool may be useful for students and OT educators alike, and therefore further testing is warranted. The results from my research studies informed my grant proposal, which I plan to submit during the next funding cycle. And my proposal aims to support further testing of the PPDT during in-person service learning and support digitizing the tool on a freely accessible website. This will make administration and scoring more streamlined, and the website will enable educators to access a validated outcome measure to promote high-quality research about student outcomes from service learning. Overall, I'm quite pleased with my outcomes from this program. In particular, I'm grateful that I was able to make the shift into academia before I even earned my OTD. And I know that my coursework and capstone research have greatly enhanced my skills as an educator. My immediate next step is to have a baby in a few weeks, and I will be taking some time to adjust to that role. I expect that the experience of becoming a parent will influence my work as an OT and an educator in ways that I can't even predict right now. But I do know that I will continue to weave my personal narrative into my work to enhance the learning experience. And when I return, I plan to continue testing and refining the PPDT. And I just want to shout out a few people for all of the support I've received during this journey. In particular, my endlessly patient family and friends, especially my mom and husband, for helping me keep it all together. My husband is running tech support in the background right now. And the mentorship I received at Columbia was just fantastic. I'm deeply grateful to my mentor, Dr. Priesen, as well as Drs. Grajo and Simon for their expert guidance. My OT classmates have just been the best moral support, and we've shared so many laughs together. And lastly, a huge thanks to my colleagues and students at LIU, especially those who participated in my research projects. I wouldn't be here today without all of the support. So thank you, everybody. I apologize for the technical glitch, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michaela. Better a technology glitch than having the baby, which we all feared during the presentation.
Yes.
We'll now open the
Me
discussion.
too.
We'll now open the space for discussion.
Sure.
So as we, as Michaela's committee does the scholarly discussion, we invite the participants and the audience to type in any questions you might have for Michaela. Dr. Priesen and Dr. Simon.
Thank you, Dr. Fraser. I think your work is quite impressive. I think it's very necessary, and I think the instrument will add a great contribution to the OT world, and I can't wait to use it. Also very impressive, I'll just reiterate what people have said, that you were able to attain academic position full-time without the OTD, and the fact that you were able to start it as a new academician full-time and continue your OTD with multiple changes that you had mentioned is just amazing. So not to mention, you know, your new baby on the way. So congratulations. It was a true pleasure working with you and getting to know you as a person. So given that, you're welcome. You're welcome. I have two questions for you. The first one is really, can you talk a little bit about the tension that you may have experienced when developing an instrument that is structured enough to be research sound and measurable, yet also flexible enough to accommodate the variety of different services and service learning experiences that one might engage in?
Yes, thank you. So that is definitely an inherent tension that was became obvious kind of early on in this process. When I looked into the literature and there wasn't real consensus about what measures to use, I started to wonder why that was. And it turns out a lot of times the educators are creating their own instruments that are tailored to the specific needs of their service learning program, as well as the specific phase of education that their students are in. You know, we wouldn't expect a first-year student like working with a community buddy to have the same experience as somebody approaching graduation going on an immersive international experience. Of course, they would have different needs, right? So a tool that is too structured or too narrow would never be able to meet the needs of both those different students in those two different experiences. And so after much consideration, I wanted to make a tool that was broad enough to hopefully capture most of the service learning experiences out there, but then allow that flexibility so that students can pick the items that are most important to them, most relevant to where they are in their education. And so that's really how the methodology of this tool came to be, where they self-select the most important items for their current stage of development. And that trade-off, you know, there may be some psychometric properties that I am not able to establish with this type of tool, but I think it is the most appropriate for the goals of enhancing development and self-reflection.
Thank you. That's a very interesting answer and well thought out on your part. Thank you. Can you also address the possibility of creating a version of this measure for community outcomes?
Sure. So among my ideal next steps, I would love to create a parallel measure, or perhaps two versions even. One may be for the educator themselves to kind of try and triangulate the data. Are they observing the same growth in their students that the students are reporting? But the lack of measuring community outcomes from service learning was almost shocking when I dove into the literature. So many educators talk about the importance of these community partnerships and that we don't want them to be exploitative or imperialistic in any way, where we come in as the educators and just drop in and say we're helping, but we might not be. We might even be causing harm potentially. And those are great ideas, right? We want to be making sure that we're working in collaboration, in coordination with our community partners, and that we're learning from each other, frankly. But the outcomes are just not being measured from the community side. So that is really one of my highest priorities for next steps. I view it as being kind of a parallel measure, though I think the items will need to be different because the community partners are not working to become entry-level OTs. But I think that was sort of a glaring gap in the literature that I came across, and I hope that that can be a next step for me.
Thank you.
Dr. Simon?
Sure. Michaela, I must say congratulations on this. It's such a pleasure because I remember the first time we met, I was actually Michaela's advisor throughout her master's program. So it's very touching to me. So impressive, and to actually see you as a teacher and as an educator. One question I just had for you was, your teaching philosophy really resonated with me. And I was just curious about what influences or changes did you experience in the non-ideal classroom setting that sort of had a unique set of demands that sort of aligned with your teaching philosophy? And how did you address those?
Sure. So the virtual environment was a whole new ballgame for many of us. Thankfully, I was 2 semesters into this program, so I did pick up a couple tricks, especially from Dr. Graho, that I was able to use. But one thing that particularly stood out to me was the need to scale back on the volume of content I was trying to disseminate when we made the shift online. My students, myself, we were all overwhelmed with the state of the world in that moment. And there was limited capacity for how much we could all take in and process at that point. And so some things that we started doing, we opened every class session with a few minutes of open floor time where students were asked to share anything that they had done in the past week that had helped them cope. So sometimes we were doing a little yoga, sometimes people were sharing a funny story, and it really helped kind of center us as we went through a long day of lecturing or lab activities. And then kind of the bookend of that, at the end of class, I realized that these students who were used to being a tight-knit cohort and together on campus most days of the week, they were really struggling by the separation. And so what I would do, I would turn off my camera, turn off my sound, and turn off the video, and I would just leave the Zoom session up. And the students kind of had a salon hour and they could talk to each other in privacy. And sometimes check back 30, 40 minutes later and they were still chatting. And I think giving them the space to explore the emotions that they were going through and support each other is really important. And having that experience so early on as an educator has been something I've tried to continue to weave in, maybe not quite as extensively as things have settled down, but making sure there's space for the relational and emotional components of learning. That's so important in a helping field like ours, where we really need to develop the skills to communicate and relate with our clients.
Yeah, it's very insightful. The next question, I think I'm putting on my fieldwork educator hat on now. There were a lot of correlations and a lot of similarities between your tool and sort of the FWPE. It's always been a pet peeve of mine that the self-reflection piece is such a big part of practice, and it's sort of the part that's missing in the FWPE. But can you also distinguish a little bit about how does one distinguish between service learning and fieldwork? Because as I was reading your things, I'm like, okay, this sounds like fieldwork. Okay, it's sort of like what you did when you were in my class for older adults going into the community. So, but I was wondering, like, if there's a distinct distinction as you were developing that tool.
Sure. So thank you. This is definitely something I wrestled with from the beginning and have had many conversations about. This question of, do all fieldworks qualify as a service learning experience? And the answer I can give is that many do and many can.
Oh no.
Michaela, we lost you there. Oh, hopefully
she'll shut her video. Yeah.
Yeah. So while we wait for Michaela to come back, if you have any additional questions there, please type them in so I can start queuing them up. Michaela, are you there?
Oh, she must be in panic mode.
I can hear an audio. Up, and we completely lost her. So hopefully she's just coming back in.
Deep breath.
I don't have her cell phone number. Pat, can you contact her directly?
I can, but I think she's working on it.
Probably, yeah. Let's
I
give
will
her
try.
a minute or
Sure.
so. Thank you all for hanging with us. Hang in there a few more minutes. Hopefully she joins back in. Hopefully it's not the baby.
I know.
For real. She did warn us though that there might be a possibility.
If it is the baby, maybe it'll be an OT.
Oh, there she
given all
is.
this information
There
you just
she is.
absorbed.
Hi.
All right.
Oh
Michaela.
my goodness. I am so sorry. I'm on Zoom all the time and I've
Take a deep breath, you're fine.
It's a little patchy again. Just turn off your video, Michaela, and we can still hear you. So do you want to address Phyllis's question?
Yes. Let me just turn that off. Oh, I apologize. So I was, I think, explaining that this is something I wrestled with, and I think fieldwork can be set up with this intentionality for students to learn about social needs and meet them and work in collaboration with partners, but that not every fieldwork is necessarily structured with that in mind. So my tool and how it can be used, this is sort of something, we talked about earlier in Jonette's slicing the pie small. I definitely scaled back initially and really tried to hone in on what makes service learning in the community distinct and to try to specifically make a tool for that. However, I think it's almost started to balloon back out as we've started to pilot test in a few different settings. Even with nursing students now, it's even expanding beyond OT. So I do think there is potential to use this as an adjunctive tool to the fieldwork performance evaluation. As we know, I think as educators, that tool can be a little intimidating for students. It's very long, it's very comprehensive. It's also really geared towards pass-fail, and that may make it not approachable and not really encourage self-reflection. I think, in fact, a lot of students look away from it, even if they're encouraged to review the items, they may not. And so using my tool as an adjunct, I think could really help them hone in on, okay, you don't have to work on everything all at once. Where are you now based on your prior life experiences and your education? And what do you need to prioritize to improve right now? And I think that it would be a beautiful marriage and sort of up for what the fieldwork performance evaluation is missing at this point in time.
Agreed. I really agree. And I just have just one other question. I love the idea of you using this interprofessionally because so many service learning tools are. We just always have to be mindful and careful about, we go in with our OT terminology. But I could see lots of even the programs that I worked with and eLink and whatnot, the relevance of something like that. And then the last comment I was going to have is just about how do you gauge and I'm glad you brought up something about that, the difference between that first semester student and the last semester students, like they don't know what they don't know. So guiding that process with self-reflection, is there do you see one part of the tool being more appropriate or applicable at the earlier stages than at the end?
Sure. Yes, that phrase, they don't know what they don't know, is something I come back to often. And I actually think that's a great aspect of this tool. In fact, I didn't go into it in the presentation, but it is very possible for somebody's numeric score to drop at post-test and reflect a negative change, but it's actually not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. A lot of times that indicates something that the experience was eye-opening in some way, made them realize perhaps they overestimated their abilities initially, or maybe they had an overly simplistic understanding of a complex issue, and now they're more aware of nuance, for example. And that's wonderful. That's not a negative thing, even though the numeric score may not reflect that. And that's why that component of self-reflection and interpretation is so important here. So that's not something you see in many traditional assessments, I think, and that adds value here. Additionally, I would say that, I did content validate the tool as a whole, and that was intentional. I always think back to an example I talk about in class, how patients with cognitive deficits often aren't aware of them or underestimate them, and they really focus on their physical deficits, right? And I a similar thing with students. I hear all the time in class, oh, I didn't get to do anything at level 1, I just want to get hands-on. And they are so focused on the hard skills, the technical skills, and they're really underemphasizing the importance of the soft skills. And I'm always saying, did you have a conversation with the clients? What did you learn about their background? How did you build a connection with them? And when you start to frame it in that way, they become aware of the skills they did practice. So I did want to make the tool where they have to at least include 1 or 2 items in all of the 5 domains to avoid that temptation of just focusing on the clinical skills. So that's where I am now, and that's how the tool has been content validated. Given me, we all have limited time, I think in an effort to potentially streamline it, that might be something in the future where I could try and validate either individual domains or find some other way to streamline the process a little bit. But I definitely want to kind of force them to look at some of the softer skills and the more complex issues beyond just the technical hands-on skills.
Congratulations. It was a pleasure being a reviewer, and I look forward to an additional dialogue with you because it triggered some ideas for me also.
Great. I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Michaela, a comment and then a more global question. And then there's one question I want to address from the chat. So a comment is that one of my favorite things about your tool is that there is complexity to calculating the scores, but there's insightfulness. There's really great insight that you can get from that complexity of deriving the scores. And I think that's a really good, we spent a lot of time talking about this. We spent a lot of time really talking about what Phyllis said earlier. How do you distinguish community-based service learning from fieldwork and making sure that the tool is not about clinical skills of the students? But then, so here's my more global question. In your exposure to the literature and tying it all back to Juliana and Jeanette's work on justice and cultural humility, in your overview and in your scoping studies and in your sort of looking into the literature, what have you experienced or what have you seen as sort of the misuses of community-based service learning, and what are the best practices to do community-based service learning? Because again, some people go in somewhere and do what they want to do and then leave there just not having the right sort of proper best practice way of doing community-based service learning. So there's sort of a justice and injustice issue there. What are your experiences on that, and what have you seen in the literature about the misuses and best practice use of community-based service learning?
Absolutely. So this is something that I've been aware of for a long time, even before becoming an OT, that, with the spirit of doing good, right, we can often go in and perhaps potentially cause harm or just really miss the target of what our intentions were. And I do think that that happens not outside of just OT education, in higher ed service learning across the board. And so one of the things I look for in the literature is a description of how the partnership was formed. And if there really was mutual interest from both sides, and if the program, whatever it is, whether, there's just such diversity, I won't go into that, but was there really a need from the community side? Is this something they wanted and asked for and had input in how it was executed? Mm-hmm. That isn't really spoken to in the article. That to me is a big red flag that you may have just sort of come in on our white horse thinking we're going to fix everything. And the other end of that spectrum is that it should be cyclical. So, of course, projects come and go over time, but if it is, truly following the best practices of service learning, this should be some sort of partnership that continues over time. And so it should be a collaborative planning process. So you plan it, you execute, you revise, right? You look at your outcomes, what worked, what didn't, and what are we going to change for next time? And so there should be ongoing communication between the educational community as well as the community partner. So if that element of ongoing dialogue should also be addressed. So those, I would say, are the two biggest things I look for. And if they aren't spoken to, that is definitely a concern.
Just very briefly now, because we're out of time, Amanda said, congratulations and wonderful work, Dr. Serafian. And she asked, since debriefing and student self-reflection require extensive time, do you have any recommendations on how to structure and include this important aspect of teaching and learning into curriculum and learning experiences?
Sure, yeah. So I would say in the service learning context, the sky is the limit, especially if it's an immersive program. So if you are somewhere, 24 hours a day for a week or two, I think you have a lot of opportunities for group reflection as well as individual reflection. It's more when we're in these once a week type settings or in the classroom where we feel a lot of pressure to get through material or other learning activities that it can be hard. So one thing that I have definitely learned from you and integrated is making reflections a component of assignments. So whether it's an in-class assignment or a take-home assignment, that the last question or two is really focused, or I don't like to use the word forcing, but it's encouraging the students to reflect on what this experience was like, what they can take from it, and what they might want to know more about. And so I think having those like 2 or 3 questions that we ask, whether it's verbally or in the assignment, can at least create a little protected time to promote that virtue of self-reflection.
Excellent. Well, you made it, Michaela. Congratulations, Dr. Fraser.
Thank you. Sorry again.
No problem. I'm going to give your family and friends and loved ones some space to congratulate you as well. I just want to do a quick wrap up before I open it to a bigger space for celebrations. Again, first, congratulations to our newly minted doctors, Dr. Ishmael, Dr. Perez, and Dr. Fraser. So thank you all for joining us today and all of our previous capstone presentations if you've joined them. Being the director of this program, teaching in this program, and having mentored in one way or form almost every single one of the graduates and current students in the PPOTD program have been some of the most fulfilling facets and role of my career as an educator. Well, when they all applied to the program, I gave them a lifetime guarantee. Every single one of them, I told that I will remain as their mentor, colleague, collaborator, and friend, even as they leave the program, and now as I leave the program at Columbia University. Sincerely, I want to use this time to thank Dr. Janet Kessler, who's not here today, Dr. Glenn Gillen for trusting me with such huge responsibility, Dr. Nilsson for your support, friendship, and mentorship. They're not always easy. The work is not always easy, but every moment has been such a fulfillment. Thank you to the faculty and the staff, all the lecturers, teaching assistants, and mentors who have supported all of us and have supported all of the students, especially during a time of massive growth and expansion and the pandemic. Thank you all for trusting me, for believing in me, for being my friends and colleagues, and being the sources of inspiration for me to fulfill my bigger dreams and my bigger professional aspirations. I am many things to many people, and having worn many hats across almost 2 decades of being an OT, the very core of me, though, is a teacher. So thank you all for teaching and learning with me this past few years. I'm so excited for Dr. Mendonça, who I know will bring the OTD programs to new heights and even better territory and open it up to a world of new possibilities. Well, this day is not about me, so we will now open the space and bring the spotlight back for another half hour for greetings from family, friends, and colleagues to our newly minted doctors. I want to hear from the family and friends of Michaela, spend some time for congratulations. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're now opening the space. Feel free to show up your videos and unmute yourselves to congratulate our OTD graduates. Congratulations, Juliana, Michaela, and Jeanette. I'm so incredibly proud of all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lennon. That was beautiful. And
Lennon.
We're going to use that lifetime guarantee. So
I just want to say
please do.
congratulations.
Yes.
And me too, Lennon. Don't forget about me. Okay, lifetime guarantee. I just wanted to say congratulations.